At my baby shower, my fiancé's mother said in front of my parents, "She'll probably quit her job once the baby's born, that's if she can even keep it till then." I said, "That's not your decision." She smiled, "Neither was the pregnancy, right?" This week, she showed up at my office with a gift. "You're being sensitive," Tyler said, his voice annoyingly even. "You know how she is." I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the small blue onesie Vera had handed me earlier that day. The one with the word "oops" stitched in baby cursive across the front. "She brought this to my workplace," I said quietly. "To my office. In front of my coworkers." He ran a hand through his hair, sighing like I was making his day harder. "Look, it's not a big deal. She's trying. In her own way." I looked up at him. "If this is her trying, I'd hate to see her when she stops. We weren't always like this." Tyler and I had once been that annoyingly functional couple, the kind who finishes each other's sandwiches and binge watches old movies on Sunday nights. I met him through a mutual friend, Danny, at a benefit dinner for a local housing nonprofit. I work there as a grant coordinator. He was tagging along for the free food, but ended up donating, which impressed me more than it should have. We had dinner the next week, moved in after a year, and somewhere along the way, we started talking about eventually and someday and maybe a kid or two. Then I got pregnant. Not on purpose, not completely by accident either. We'd been lazy with contraception one night after a couple too many drinks and a lot of what-ifs. I found out 3 weeks later, sitting on the edge of our bathtub, holding a stick that would reroute the rest of my life. I wasn't scared. I was grounded. I'd just turned 34, and while I wasn't planning it, I wasn't exactly panicked either. I was making good money, had savings, benefits, family support. Tyler took longer to absorb the news. His first reaction was silence. Then, "Okay. We'll figure it out." I believed him. His mother, Vera, was less composed. "You're keeping it?" she asked, after blinking like someone had just thrown cold water in her face. We were having brunch at a place in Stillwater. She barely touched her omelet. "It's just such a critical time in your career. For both of you." Translation: she thought I'd trapped her son. She never said it outright, but Vera had a way of seasoning everything she said with implication. She was retired, but still carried herself like a school principal who had caught you chewing gum in class. She made comments often, small things that stuck. Like how young I looked for someone who works with serious issues, or how funny it was that I handled financials when I admitted I hated spreadsheets. It was never enough to cause a fight, but enough to wear you down. And then came the baby shower. It was supposed to be a calm, sweet Sunday. We rented a small hall near the river, decorated with paper flowers and pale yellow banners. My parents flew in from Denver. Friends came from all over. People brought gifts, tiny clothes, picture books, swaddle blankets. I felt genuinely loved, for a while. Then Vera struck. She had just refilled her mimosa when she strolled over to where I was sitting with my parents. Without missing a beat, she smiled and said, "She'll probably quit her job once the baby's born. That's if she can even keep it till then." My mom froze. My dad raised an eyebrow. I looked at her and replied, "That's not your decision." She didn't flinch. Just leaned a little closer and said, "Neither was the pregnancy, right?" And then she walked away. Just like that. I didn't cry. Not then. Not there. I stood up, said I needed to use the restroom, and stayed there for 20 minutes staring at the tiled floor, trying to slow my breathing. Later, I told Tyler. He rolled his eyes and said, "Come on. You're reading into it." Reading into it. 2 weeks later, she came to my job. She'd called my office line 3 times that morning and hung up. My assistant Julian said there was a very firm woman in reception asking for me. She was carrying a gift bag. I walked out and there she was, sitting like she owned the building. She stood when she saw me, smiled, and handed me the bag. "It's for the baby," she said. I opened it. The onesie said oops. I looked up. She was still smiling. What the heck is this? Oh, come on, she said lightly. It's just a joke. You know, since the pregnancy wasn't exactly planned. I stood there, heart hammering, the fabric balled in my fist. Leave, I said. She raised an eyebrow. Touchy. Leave. She did, eventually, after making sure she'd left a stain on the day. I told Tyler that night. I told him everything. He barely reacted. She's always been like this, he said. She means well. And that's when I started to feel the most dangerous kind of shift. Not anger. Not betrayal. Just resignation. That maybe this was the man I was going to raise a child with. Maybe I was doing it alone already. I didn't respond to Tyler after that conversation. Not really. I nodded. I got up. I washed dishes we didn't use. I sat in the dark while he scrolled on his phone. There was this overwhelming quietness in the apartment, like we were both pretending nothing had happened, like if we kept moving through the motions, the rot under our feet wouldn't show. But it was already showing. That same week, I went back to work, and every time I walked through the doors, I wondered who had seen the onesie. Who had heard Vera's sugary voice or her offhand comments. I kept thinking about the smug smile on her face, how she knew she could get away with it because I wouldn't cause a scene. And she was right. I didn't. But something inside me had started to calcify. I stopped asking Tyler to come to OB appointments with me. He only showed up to one, late, blaming a meeting that ran long. I started filling out the medical forms alone, circling emergency contact with hesitation, wondering how much that really meant if the person on the other end couldn't even defend you in a conversation, let alone in an emergency. He'd ask how the baby was. I'd say fine. He'd say he'd been tired, then ask if we could order out instead of cooking. Every dinner became an exercise in silence, him chewing, me measuring the weight of staying. We had a therapy session scheduled. I booked it after the baby shower disaster. He agreed to come. Sat across from me, arms folded, sighing often. The therapist asked what his relationship was like with his mother, and he said, "She's just blunt. That's how she loves." I didn't say anything in that moment, but I wrote that sentence down in my phone. I read it again that night while lying on my side, hand resting on my growing belly. I thought, this is how he defines love. He skipped the next session. Priya, my best friend, started calling me more often. She lived on the other side of Minneapolis, had 2 kids, a husband who traveled often, and still managed to check in more consistently than my fiancé. "You don't sound like you anymore," she said one day while I was organizing baby clothes. "You sound like you're making yourself smaller." I didn't know what to say. She was right. I used to be sharp, witty, quick to clap back. I'd run meetings with board directors and pitch full grant strategies to investors without blinking. But lately, I'd been shrinking. Just so everything would stay peaceful. And for what? So Vera could keep swinging punches and Tyler could keep playing Switzerland? One night, I was folding towels when I noticed Tyler's iPad had lit up on the coffee table. I wasn't snooping. I honestly wasn't. I walked past it and saw a message preview pop up. Can't stop thinking about that night. I froze. I picked up the iPad. It wasn't locked. The messages were between him and a woman named Natalie. His ex, someone I'd heard of once. They'd dated before me, nothing long-term, supposedly. But here she was. In his messages. Calling him T, laughing about things he'd complained about. I read every line like it was a confession. She's just so emotional all the time now. We barely talk like we used to. I don't know if it's the pregnancy or what, but I feel stuck. Stuck. That word hit me harder than any of Vera's barbs. I didn't confront him that night. I put the iPad down, walked into the bedroom, and lay next to the man I was building a life with. He didn't notice my shaking hands or the silent tears I wiped onto the pillowcase. The next morning, I packed a bag. A small one. Just essentials. I texted Priya. "Can I come stay for a bit?" She responded instantly. "Of course. Always." I didn't leave a note. I didn't announce it. I waited until he left for work, then I left too. Just in a different direction. Priya's house was loud and chaotic, filled with crayons on the floor and baby toys that sang nursery rhymes on loop. It was exactly what I needed. Her youngest clung to my leg like I was made of candy. Her oldest asked if I wanted to play Uno. I said yes. I said yes to everything for the first time in weeks. I told Priya about the texts. She didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't tell me to leave him. She just poured me tea and said, "You can take your time. But you can also take your power back." That night, Tyler texted me 3 times. First, "Where are you?" Then, "We need to talk." Finally, "You can't just run away from problems." I didn't answer. Not yet. I needed to find my center again before I decided what came next. And more than anything, I needed to figure out who I was outside of the woman Tyler had slowly convinced me to become. The next day, he showed up. I was sitting on Priya's couch, wearing one of her oversized cardigans, eating dry cereal out of a mug when her doorbell rang. She peeked through the blinds. "It's him," she said, mouth tightening. I put the mug down, my pulse fluttering. "You can let him in." Priya didn't move. "You sure?" I nodded. "Yeah." She opened the door. Tyler stepped in like he didn't know how to carry his own body, like all the confidence he normally wore like a coat had vanished. He looked tired. Unshaven. Still somehow so familiar it hurt. "Can we talk?" he said. Priya gave me a look and disappeared upstairs without a word. He sat in the chair opposite me. I didn't offer him anything. He didn't ask. He looked around awkwardly, then back at me. "I know I messed up." Silence. He cleared his throat. "You shouldn't have had to find out like that." "The messages, I mean. Natalie was just someone I talked to when I didn't know how to talk to you." I raised an eyebrow. "I didn't cheat," he added quickly. "Not physically. But I know it doesn't really matter." I didn't say anything. I let the air stretch. He kept going. "I felt like I was losing you. You were shutting down. Always tired, always somewhere else. And I didn't know what to do with that." I laughed once, sharp and low. "You didn't know what to do with me, being pregnant." He opened his mouth, closed it again. "It's not about Natalie," I said, my voice level. "It's about you not standing up for me. It's about your mom showing up to my workplace to humiliate me, and you acting like it's just a character quirk." "She didn't mean it like that." "Stop," I said, holding up my hand. "Please. Don't defend her right now. Not if you're actually trying to fix this." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I'm not defending her. I'm just realizing I should have said something sooner. I thought if I just kept things calm between you two, it would pass." "That's not partnership," I said, still calm. "That's cowardice." It was harsh. But not untrue. He looked down. "I want to make it right." I didn't know what right looked like anymore. But I told him something honest. "I need time. I need space. And I need you to understand that this baby is happening, with or without your participation." He nodded slowly, then stood. "Okay." He didn't ask when he could see me again. He didn't reach for a hug. He just left. I stayed with Priya for another week. In that time, I started researching legal options. Custody. Parental rights. I wasn't planning anything drastic, I just wanted to understand my position. I needed to know that I wasn't tied to someone out of default. I needed to know I had a choice. And Vera? She stayed quiet. For a whole 8 days. Then a letter arrived at Priya's house. It was handwritten, on thick ivory stationery. Vera's handwriting was the same strict cursive you'd expect from a retired school principal, elegant, controlled, cold. The letter was 2 pages long. Not an apology. Not even close. It was an attempt at rewriting history. She opened with, "I'm sure you're being advised by friends to hate me right now, and I understand that emotions are high during pregnancy. Then, I only ever wanted the best for my son. I worry, Mira, that your emotionality clouds your judgment. Then, I truly hope, for the baby's sake, that you can find your way back to a healthy dynamic." She signed it warmly, Vera Halden. I didn't respond. I didn't even show Tyler. I folded it neatly, tucked it in a folder labeled documentation, and slid it to the back of my suitcase. That letter told me everything I needed to know. She wasn't sorry. She was preparing her defense. When I moved back into our apartment, yes, I went back, temporarily, it was for logistical reasons. I needed time to sort my maternity leave, secure childcare plans, and decide where I would live long term. Tyler offered to sleep on the couch. I didn't object. We operated like distant roommates. No arguments. No touching. No warmth. Just truce. Then one morning, I caught him crying. It was 6:30 a.m., and I'd gotten up to pee for the 3rd time that night. I walked past the living room and heard the soft, broken sound of someone trying not to make noise. He was sitting there in the dark, head in his hands. I didn't interrupt. I just watched. Later that day, he texted me from the other room, "I booked another therapy session. I'll go this time. Even if you don't come." It was something. A week later, my doctor said I'd need to slow down. My blood pressure was elevated, and she was concerned about stress. I started working from home full-time, which meant more hours alone in the apartment. That's when Vera started calling again. Blocked numbers. Then voicemails. Then emails. Always dressed in civility. "I'm reaching out because I believe we got off on the wrong foot. I worry that this rift will create an unstable environment for my grandchild. And then the kicker, I would like to be present for the birth." That email made me laugh so hard I startled the baby. I forwarded it to Tyler. He called her. I only heard one side of it, muffled through the bedroom door, but it ended with him saying, "No. This isn't about you. Stay away from her." He looked shaken when he came out of the room. "I told her not to contact you again. She's blocked on everything. I'm sorry I didn't do that sooner. I didn't say thank you." But I nodded. It wasn't a turning point. Not yet. But it was the first time I saw him actually choose me, out loud, in real time. And I realized I didn't need him to be perfect. I just needed him to be present. To show up. That, and keep her the heck away from me. By the 8th month, things between Tyler and me weren't fixed, but they were different. He was showing up to therapy. He started reading parenting books, even joined one of my virtual birthing classes. There were moments of softness again, moments where I could see the version of him I'd loved re-emerging. But I was careful with those moments. I didn't mistake improvement for resolution. What mattered more than what he said was how I felt. And I felt stronger. Then came the shower invite from his side of the family. Tyler's Aunt Evelyn, bless her diplomatic soul, had reached out to say she wanted to throw a small gathering just for family. No games, no speeches. Just dinner and a few gifts. She assured me it wouldn't be anything like that last one, in her words. She even said Vera would not be invited unless I said yes. I agreed. For Evelyn, not for Vera. A week before the dinner, though, Vera showed up again. Not in person this time, but in a more clever way. She'd mailed a gift directly to Evelyn's address. It arrived in a beautifully wrapped box with a card addressed to baby Halden. Not to me. Not to Tyler. Just the baby. Inside the box was a baby-sized cashmere blanket and a framed print of an old family tree. A little family lineage chart, stretching back generations. At first glance, it was sweet. Almost touching. Until you looked closely. Nowhere on that tree was my name. She had written in Tyler. She had written Baby Halden. She'd even penciled in her name and her late husband's. But me? I didn't exist. Evelyn was livid. She called me immediately. I swear to God, Mira, I didn't know. I wouldn't have let it through the door. I laughed. Really, actually laughed. Because at that point, Vera wasn't even trying to be subtle anymore. And that's when I decided I was done reacting. It was time to respond. When I gave birth in early January, it was smooth, as far as labor goes. Sophie Lynn Chambers came into the world with a loud cry and eyes wide open. She was perfect. And I didn't put Tyler's last name on the birth certificate. I hadn't told him I was considering that, but once I saw her, once I held her, I just knew. He didn't ask about it right away. He held her, cried, whispered something only she could hear. And I let him have that moment. But 3 days later, he noticed it on the hospital forms. She doesn't have my last name, he said, quiet. No, I replied. She has mine. He looked like he wanted to argue. But he didn't. He nodded once. And that was the end of it. Now, here's the part that you might consider revenge. Not cruel. Not violent. Just poetic. A month later, Vera sent me an email. Subject line, requesting a visit. Body text, Mira, I know you're still angry. I want to meet my granddaughter. I think it's important for Sophie to know her family. I'm willing to come to you, no expectations. Please consider it. Vera Halden. I read it once. Then twice. And then I did something I hadn't done the entire pregnancy. I invited her. But not to my house. I asked her to meet me at a small cafe in Cathedral Hill, the kind with exposed brick and warm lighting. I arrived early and picked a table by the window. Tyler wasn't there. Sophie wasn't either. Just me. Dara arrived wearing a neatly pressed coat and her usual forced smile. She approached with an air of triumph, like she'd already won just by getting me to show up. She sat across from me and said, I'm glad you agreed to this. I smiled. I wanted to make something clear. She blinked. Of course. You will not see Sophie. Not now. Maybe not ever. That depends on you. Her posture shifted. I'm her grandmother. No, I said. You're my child's biological relative. That title comes with privileges only if it's earned. She opened her mouth. I kept going. You belittled me in public. You tried to shame me in my workplace. You undermined my relationship, my independence, and now you think you're entitled to walk into my child's life like nothing happened? She reached into her bag, flustered, and pulled out another envelope. I brought something, I didn't touch it. She pushed it across the table. It's a trust. I've opened one for Sophie. $5,000 to start. I wanted to show I'm serious. I didn't even look at it. You want to buy your way into her life? It's a gesture. I folded my hands calmly. Here's what you can do instead. Go to therapy. Apologize to me, publicly. Own what you did. Then we'll talk about supervised visits. Her face turned to stone. And if you don't? I said. That's fine. Because I'll be honest with Sophie when she's older. I'll tell her who showed up, and who didn't. I'll tell her who earned their place, and who forfeited it. Dara's lips parted, a sharp inhale, but no words came. You can go now, I said. She stood slowly. Picked up the untouched envelope. And walked out. It's been 6 months. Sophie is crawling now. Laughs when I say the word banana and tries to chew on books like they're snacks. Tyler and I co-parent. He lives in a small place 10 minutes away and sees her regularly. We're not back together, and maybe we never will be, but we're good parents. That's enough. Vera? She's silent. I think she knows I meant what I said. Sometimes power doesn't come from yelling or getting even. Sometimes it comes from living well without the people who tried to make you feel small. Sometimes, the best revenge is just becoming impossible to control.